So guys, I do want to talk about the Japanese anime Elfin Lied, and I'm planning on doing a video series about the themes of Elfin Lied, and I really would just say that overall, as far as an anime goes, I will say that it does have its ups and downs, and I would say that it's a thematic anime versus a story anime. And what I mean by that is that a story is when usually the message is very direct. Like, for example, in the film The Joker, when the Joker is saying the lines of, what do you get when you take a mentally ill person and you abuse and abandon him and put him in a society that treats him like trash? I'll tell you what you get. You get what you fucking deserve. That's the central theme of Joker, because he's stating the message that this is a film about the consequences of exploiting mentally ill people and cutting funding to mentally ill programs, because that's what happened to the Joker. If I'm correct, he was going to get psychiatric help and the programming got cut, really. And then you see through the film like how people treat him weirdly, or like a psycho, really, or just like he's a nut job on the street. And then actually, he gets invited on the Murray show, so he knows that he's treated like a character of sympathy, and Murray doesn't really respect him because he made fun of his comedy, really. So it almost feels like, oh, well, hand out to a mentally ill person type of thing, really. So to me, that is the story of the Joker. There are other themes about tragedy and a person that's going through a bad time, and that his life would have changed for the better if he held himself together during the Murray show. So sometimes, there's themes of, keeping yourself together through hard times, but the story really is that society needs to treat people with mental health issues better. We need to have funding, because that can lead to tragedy and exploitation and resentment that leads to violence. That's kind of like the story of Joker, the Joaquin Phoenix Joker. And then you look at something more thematic like The Simpsons, because The Simpsons is really about generational trauma. Because, you look at Homer Simpson, his mother abandoned him because she wanted to be an environmental activist and leave him. She didn't really think about what was best for him. She thought about what was best for her and what was best for society. And even though he was struggling, she could have always came back later on in life. Later on in his childhood, and be like, okay, you need a mother and I need to help you out. And then you also look at Abe Simpson, who, even though Homer was a very frustrating child, he would say things like, okay, during counseling sessions, he would say to his wife, if we ever get a divorce, you and I don't get Homer, and he would also strangle Homer. And then you see how Homer grew up, instead of becoming a father that was more of a father to Bart, and then also disciplined him and realized that, okay, maybe if discipline doesn't work on him, I need to send him off to military school, or that summer camp program where he was in Oregon, I believe, and they actually had him cut wood and give him positive reinforcement. Homer uses strangulation on Bart. Homer doesn't stand his ground because he's too nice of a parent, really. So I think that he's a mix of doing what he knows to Bart, which doesn't work, and then also being too lenient because he doesn't want to be like his father. So he goes back and forth between being a bad parent in a permissive way and in an abusive way. And excuse me. And then also another theme is, like, you see how he is towards Maggie, where he's very neglective, and then you also see how he is towards Lisa. Instead of, because he's a good talker, he's a good hustler, instead of using that to help her get scholarships or putting her in private schools, or instead of overcoming alcoholism and having extra money to send her to a good private school, or teach her how to make money and get a good job or invest in the stock market. Because he has all that intelligence and all that hustle skills, and also knows how to kind of be like the street smart, and she knows how to be the book smart. Not teach her how to be, self-made money type of thing, and then use that towards advancing her. He just doesn't care about her problems, and, he would rather spend his money on booze than help her out, really. And then, he's not the best husband to his wife. He keeps, in every episode, he learns a lesson they get closer, he forgets his lesson, really, So The Simpsons more thematic about generational trauma. It is a story of generational trauma, and how emotional and physical abuse can be so impactful on a person in their childhood that they pass down to another childhood. So that's very thematic. When I look at the story of Elfin Lied, there are a lot of themes in it, but I think the central theme is about killing and whether or not killing is justified, what happens when you have a character that should be justified in killing somebody and they choose to do it or not do it. What happens when you have characters that are killers or abusers and they don't have a backstory versus characters that do have a backstory experiencing that treatment? And also just, as I said, a separate video about, what I've learned from the themes of Elfin Lied in my life. So I do want to start with Kouta, who is the main character. He's the second main character of Elfin Lied. So what happens to him is that he and Lucy met when they were children. And what happened was that he had a sister that was killed, that was killed as a child, and he always thought that he had PTSD, so he kind of forgot about it, but he knew that she died. And then I think what he believed for a while was that it was a bomb that went off and killed people. And then later in his memory, he realized it was actually Lucy killing her in a rage. And when he was a kid, I think he pins Lucy down, puts his thumbs in her throat, and starts banging her head against the ground and telling her to stop what she's doing, really, just to kind of get through to her that all this, bloodshed is wrong. So he represents a couple of things. I think that in one sense, if he could have killed Lucy then and there, really, and we saw that as the viewers, we can be like, hell yeah, just destroy her for what she did. Wrong is wrong. Doesn't matter her childhood, wrong is wrong. So he's justified in eradicating her because she hurt innocent people. She has the ability to hurt more people. She actually hurt his relatives. So we all know that, you don't lay hands on somebody's relatives. If somebody does any type of crime, physical, murder, sexual, anything to a relative, we all have the ability we all can justify somebody wanting to put hands on somebody or take that person's life, really. But I think with Kouta, there's a couple of things, really, that I think Kouta understands, in the sense that Lucy is a multidimensional person. He can forgive that because he has it in his heart, really. And I think that he also, and I've not watched, I've seen the remaining episodes. I watched the whole series like 13 years ago, so I'm going off of what I remember. But I'm rewatching the series now, so I'm episode 3. But what I remember is that I think that he doesn't want her to leave because he knows that she's going to become the same type of monster, that maybe they can form a relationship with each other and keep each other kind of stable. So I do think that, he doesn't want her. He thinks that what's going to lead to more problems is him rejecting her, abandoning her, and maybe she needs his love. Maybe love is what she needs to be taught, really. And sometimes there are people who may be antisocial or sociopathic, and people realize that the thing that they need is actually love and nurture. And sometimes that can help a person, and sometimes that can actually, you can actually get an Eric Cartman situation where Leanne seems to be dismissive of Cartman's behavior, maybe ground him and then forget about it, or overlook how intense the stuff that he did. So you can do that, really. But I think with Kouta's character, I think his character represents that eradicating somebody is not right, because there are some people that can change their ways, and sometimes we know deep down that they are a monster because that's all they've been taught, or they've been through so many bad situations over and over and over again that they need to be taught how to undo their behavior. It's almost like, if a kid was abused very deeply and they're abusive and they are adopted into a family that gives them nurture and love, they may learn that, okay, there's other ways to express themselves outside of hurting others. So I think with Kota's character, I see a sense of forgiveness over killing, and then also, um, you know, and also just that some people can change. Some people can change, and because there are people like who on YouTube that have served time in jail for serious crimes, and now they do videos about getting out of jail and turning their life around and being members of their community. There are people who can, redeem themselves. Redemption is part of life. I think so. I think that with Kota's character, we see somebody who's thematic of, okay, instead of eradicating somebody or kicking somebody out of their life and that person becomes a bigger monster, sometimes forgiveness is important. Sometimes believing in redemption is important. Sometimes understanding that, at the core of some people who do some very horrible things, they can redeem themselves, or they can realize, okay, maybe they justify doing horrible things to other people, but they can learn to not continue that pattern and actually become good people and definitely atone for all their sins. So I think that that's what his character represents to me. So definitely that is a theme. And then also I would say that there's a bad side to that. It's good to understand that there's, like look at Kenshin and Roni Kenshin, like how he went from being the manslayer to somebody who's saved the entire society and done a lot of great things. There's there's also Goku and Dragon Ball Z, like how he wants to bring people back from the dead and protect the universe, but he was also part of a race of people that believed in annihilating planets of people and stuff like that, really. So there is something to say about people being part of a group that's caused annihilation and redemption, and how the people that you give a chance to redemption can create a greater good. And then there's also situations where, as I said, you run into an Eric Cartman situation where, like, what would happen if they had season 2 and Lucy continues that bad behavior, or if Lucy kills Kouta and all the other people, then she's on a killing spree, becomes the main villain of season 2. Or what would happen if her being around is nothing but them getting consistent attacks by the science organization, really. So it's also kind of like that other thing too, is that, sometimes when we forgive somebody or we believe that they can redeem themselves, sometimes they will not do that. Sometimes they'll take kindness for weakness. Sometimes they'll lead to more problems. Sometimes you're putting yourself at risk for the rest of your life. And so it doesn't always lead to a happy result. I mean, there was a film, I think it was Anne Hathaway was in it, where she had a kid, or she was having a Christmas, so she visits a kid from a psychiatric. So she had a kid that was in a psychiatric ward and had a bunch of problems. He comes home and visit them, and she kept giving him second chances, and there was more problem after more problem after more problem after more problem. And I think it ends where she and her youngest daughter's in a car crash and their holiday's ruined, but he actually was manipulating her so he can do a couple of drug deals and other like issues. So the theme of that movie was really about, the idea of what happens when we're a little too blind and giving people second chances. We keep allowing somebody to get second chances. We keep discovering that they're actually part of a bigger problem, or they're not actually changed, So, or sometimes we realize that, okay, they did something so severe, so I gave them a second chance, and then I'm not saying, okay, well, man, that was so severe in the past, really. Maybe I shouldn't have given them the second chance, and now I'm paying for that, Like in that movie, he's part of just deals and other like big problems, and now he owes people, and now he knows that if he's held up or whatever, and that eventually people are going to track him down, so he might as well go back home and settle those deals that he owes people to, and use his family and hurt his family and get his family in trouble and not really care about it. So that could be Lucy in the sense, really, that Kouta gives a chance to Lucy, and Lucy brings a bunch of chaos because she doesn't care, or she never really learns the emotional control, or there could be a good front and whatever, really. And then there's also a third side of him being like a Ned Flanders character, Kouta, of, well, you're too forgiving, because obviously if you're too forgiving, that can be a huge weakness, and that could bring a bunch of problems on yourself, really. Or that can say your heart doesn't really merit people's actions. She is a mass murderer, and there's nothing that she could do to atone for that, and she's going to be consistently be attacked by the science organization, and Kouta's going to be involved in that because obviously, that's for like the safety of all people on Earth, really. So obviously, there's a saying about him being way too forgiving and everything like that. But from Kouta's side, as I said, I think he represents very, very deeply the consequences of what happens when you are giving up, the consequences of a second chance, the consequences of, forgiveness, the consequences of believing people can redeem themselves, the consequences of believing that, even in an evil heart or a heart that's been ruined and destroyed and gone through trauma, that there's actually a good soul in that. And maybe the good soul can come out if there was tender love and care, or also if that stuff never happened in the first place, really. Or understanding that some people are conditioned to be evil because they've gone through so much abuse and trauma, but there's a way for them to change, from that, So definitely, you know, that's all, very, very true. It gets to my feelings because I remember, dealing with situations like that. I remember like when I was a kid, I was roughhousing with my brother. I took it a little too far. My dad came this close to beating me with a vacuum cleaner because he felt that when I hit my brother, like what happened was I had a miniature baseball bat. And I hit my brother inside the head, really. And the reason why I did that was because my brother roughed me up really bad and was scratching me and cutting me with his fingernails. And then only a few weeks ago, and I felt like I wanted to get back at him. And then I was also abused by my camp counselors. They would throw things at my head, so I remember that trauma. And I was bullied in middle school. But I remember my dad trashing the house and came this close to beating me with a vacuum cleaner to get it through my head that you don't hurt another relative, And even though that was the wrong way, it taught me that that I don't have the right to just take things too far. It was not the most appropriate response. When I talked to my therapist, he did get a talking to about that. But in the sense of Kouta, my dad could have easily kicked me, just said, called the adoption agency and said, like, even though it's 6 or 7 years later, he's gone, type of thing. Or, or again, it was hypocritical because, you look at the example my dad was setting, because my dad had a bunch of violent flip outs. So it is a little hypocritical to say, don't be violent because don't be violent, because the message I got was daddy can be violent, but the kids can't. Or daddy will put the kids in place with violence, but a kid can't put another kid in place with violence. It wasn't really the right way, but it was kind of along the message of, you know what, you still get a second chance, and I'm going to do whatever I can to get through to you. Even though the method that was done was completely inappropriate with what happened to me. But definitely Kota's love for Lucy, it's not appropriate because he needs to merit what she did, but that's a way better method than just annihilating her. If then just annihilating her because in his heart of hearts he doesn't think that's right. I think that annihilating her would be right because obviously she's a danger to herself and other people, and that's clearly shown, really. But she deserved a second chance, but also just a rehabilitation and just a chance to say, can you live like at least 6 or 7 months without hurting people, and then you should continue your life if you can, and not continue if you can't. Really, that should have been how it should have been done, really. But his character definitely represents a lot of just is it eradication versus a second chance,